So this is just a short video to try and explain or simplify what other people just don't seem to understand. Just to start with, just ask yourself two simple questions. Do you understand how money is created in modern society? Also, do you understand how, for example, the housing bubble works? And this information, though I'm talking about it in the setting of Ireland, the same information is relevant to anywhere in the world, whether it's Ireland, UK, the United States of America, Chile, Greece, India, China, right down to the poorest countries in the world, Zimbabwe, Malawi. They're all running fractional reserve banking. All the banks are printing counterfeit money, and they are slowly but surely stealing everything of real value in all the countries. Now this is how money is created today. Okay, it's a scam where the bank do not have any money in the bank. If you get a loan in the bank, you probably think, like I did when I got a mortgage, you probably think that the bank holds a certain amount of principal, whatever that is, stocks, gold, silver, oil, a certain amount of commodities, or even properties that are entrusted to the bank to be used as principal, to be used as value. And when you get that loan, that value is then entrusted to you, and you're responsible to make sure that the value of that principal is paid back. But the thing is, in reality, there is no principal there. When you get a mortgage, the only two things which have value are the house and your wages. Now the bank prints out money, paper money, but it doesn't have anything to back it. It doesn't reflect the value of anything that the bank owns or the bank holds. It reflects the value of the house, or it actually reflects the value that the bank decides the house is worth. Now I'll explain this soon enough, but for now the only value is in the house and your wages, your work. So the bank creates this money with nothing to back it. It is given as a loan. It's fraudulent because the person getting the loan is not told that the money is counterfeit, that there's nothing to back it. But once the contract is signed, then the person basically agrees that the bank has the right of ownership over the person's wages, and the bank has the right of ownership over the house. And because the owner of the house is none the wiser either, they will accept that, and so the contract is complete. Okay, now so that's how the banks create money. They create fraudulent money, counterfeit money. And if you don't believe that, go and look it up. Ask the banks. They call it fractional reserve bank, and they say as long as they hold 3% of the money, 3% of the principal, they're allowed to print 97% of counterfeit money. Mortgages, how banks steal properties. I'll try and use as a basic example. We have two people trying to buy the same house of, say for example, €100,000. Now the first person has saved all their money. They have a €100,000 in their pocket to buy the house at 100,000. You have the person who doesn't have €100,000. They maybe have 10,000, maybe have 20,000. So I'll just say that, for example, they have 10,000. Now they go along, and the two people bid for the house at 100,000. So it comes back that there's two people bidding. So then automatically, of course, you're expected the house will go up in value, will go up to 105,000, because of course the seller wants to get the highest price. Now the person that has 100,000 euros hasn't got the extra 5,000 to go up to 105,000, but the person who has 10,000 euros goes to the bank, and the bank hasn't got the 100,000 or the 105,000 in principle. The bank perhaps only has 5,000 in principle that it's willing to print the counterfeit money against. And so the bank who does not have the money, the buyer who does not have the money, they print counterfeit money under fractional reserve banking of 105,000. So the person who has got value now can't compete, because this fraudulent system has printed out counterfeit money, and the person who has the loan from the bank goes along, buys the house for 105,000 euros. The housing bubble got to a stage in Ireland where standard practice in most countries is that the loans, the counterfeit loans, fraudulent loans given by banks is 2.5 times the person's income. So you had people in Ireland pre-1997 say earning 40,000 a year will get a loan of 100,000 euros. By 2006, 2007, people were getting probably on average about 6 or 7 times what their income was, and in some cases up to 10, 11, 12 times. So you have people earning 40,000 euros a year being given these fraudulent loans of 400,000 euros. That's what inflated the housing prices, and of course the reason being it's in the benefit of the banks, because when these people have to pay that, as their income increases, the money is not going to make their lives better. The banks have seen what's happened. They saw that Ireland was a rising economy. They saw that the people were well educated, they were a good workforce, and so they decided to use the scam to ensure that even though Ireland never seemed to slow down in its exports, never slowed down in the amount of money coming into Ireland. It's just that the amount of money coming in, rather than staying in Ireland and being used to raise the standard of living in Ireland, the banks used this little scam to cream off the money. So even though there's more money coming in now, there's more money going out to the bondholders to do whatever they want, usually to impoverish others, to steal from others, and to murder. So this is why houses which cost basically 20,000 euros to build, when you include labour, the materials and the planning, 20,000 euros to build a house. These houses are being sold in Ireland for 300,000, 400,000 euros. It's not market values, it's bank values. It was not the dynamics of the market which decided the prices, it's the banks which decide the prices. Once you understand how fractional reserve banking works, it doesn't matter what value you have. If you have value, you're pushed out. It's the banks and the fraudulent money which dictates the values. So now the person left with the 100,000 in order to live must go along and rent a house. They can't live in their own house, so they have to rent a house. So it's still serfdom. Either way, it's serfdom. Either you go to the bank and you become subservient to the bank, or you go to a private landlord and you're subservient to a private landlord. But because there's a trickle-up effect, when you pay that private landlord is probably paying a mortgage back to the bank, or is paying high taxes to the government, which is owned by the bank. See, people have this idea that because they're allowed to exercise votes, that they live in democracies. They do not. There is no democratic country existing in the world today. And I'll explain it to you. If we take the example of another privately run corporation, say for example a supermarket like Walmart or Tesco or Dunnes Stores, these are all private corporations, just as the governments are, like the Irish government, the British government, French government. They're all private corporations. But people have this concept that because they're allowed to vote and who sits on the governing boards, the governments, it's a democracy. Now, Tesco or Walmart could allow everybody, every member of the public, to vote on who sits on their governing body, who decides prices, who decides when they're going to give special offers, and they can make all sorts of promises that we'll put such and such on special offer, we'll have great deals in such and such a month, in order to get votes. People vote them into the positions of power in their governing body. But that does not mean that people own Tesco's, and it never will mean that people own Tesco's or Walmart or Dunnes Stores or whatever. It's just an exercise in getting the public on board and getting the public to go along, making them feel involved. It's exactly the same with the governments. Especially in the last few years, the last 10 years probably, well, I suppose for decades, but it's become blindingly obviously in the last 10 years that the governments they're owned by the banks, the bondholders. In Ireland, for example, roughly about 25%, 30% of Irish taxes now go to the bondholders, go to the banks. And we know that policy is decided by the banks. For example, the last Irish election or exercise in election, the Fine Gael Labour parties made a contract with the Irish people that if you vote us into government, we will not take any more of your taxes, or to be more concise, we will not steal any more of your taxes and give it to the bondholders, the banks. Now, as soon as they got in, they won the election. It was not the people's wishes which were carried out. It was the bank's wishes. It was the banks that owned the government. The banks said, no, you're going to keep stealing the taxes and giving it to us. And they did. And some people say, well, that's your point of view. You're entitled to your point of view. I just don't agree. Well, it's not a point of view. It's a fact. It's a technical fact. You know, you can disagree that the world is round. You can say the world is flat. Oh, we'll agree to disagree. No, it's a fact the world is round. It's a fact that the world is in servitude. If you look at the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, one of the articles talks about slavery. It's forbidden, slavery in all its forms. All its forms. Now, servitude or serfdom is a form of slavery. People paying rent to private landlords. It's a trickle up system where the wealth goes from the people down below and goes to the people up above. So there's no ambiguity. There are no democracies in the world. So when people go to courts thinking that the courts are independent, they're not. The courts are run by the banks, and the courts rule deciding on what the banks want. So basically the difference between legality and the law is this. The law is universal. The law is to live without interfering with others, to live in peace. And the law is only broken when you break others' peace, when you impose yourself upon them, when you impinge upon their freedom, their property, or their character, or their relationships. Then you break the law. For the law to be broken, there must be a victim. There must be an injured party. Now, legality. What is legal is rules within a defined system. So you have the current legal system, for example, in the UK, in Ireland, in the United States of America, and many other countries, is stems from King Henry VIII and his honourable society of people who are set up as judges to decide in cases where people didn't follow the rules of the kingdom, and it's no different today. Legality is a system of rules within a specific structure, and you follow those rules. Like, for example, if you were in school, you have specific rules in school that you must follow. You know, you arrive at 9 o'clock in the morning, for example, and you go for lunch at whatever time, 1 o'clock. You don't run in the corridors. Now, these are not against the law. You're not breaking the law, but because you're in that institution, you're expected to obey or follow the rules. That makes it smooth running for everybody. So that's basically the same as happens with legality. People came together in ancient times in democracy to agree what would happen, to agree how their societies would run smoothly, and it's the same principle which legality goes upon, but it's not the law. It is very little to do with the law, and it's not. Of course, it's not. It's nothing to do with democracy either, because the rules, the legal rules, are decided by the Bar Association, which is a branch of the bank. So when somebody talks about the law, that's the law. It's not the law. It's a legal act. For example, recently the private corporate government in Ireland brought in this act that if a policeman stops you in the street and asks you your name, you must give your name, or you are breaking the law. You're not breaking the law if you don't give your name. It's actually, in fact, the police officer that's breaking the law if they assault you for not giving your name. But because, like I said, the example of police officers who think who believe and trust that what they are taught is the truth, they go along actually believing that they are obeying the law. It's not. It's about sovereignty. It's about having the right to live as a free human being. Because as long as you're in the system, you're not a free human being. You may have some more privileges than other slaves, but you are not free. And until you accept that you're not free, that you're a slave, you're not going to go about changing it. And so that's basically why I'm making this video, so people can understand and maybe start looking at what people are saying and stop listening to the banks and their cronies and their stooges in governments, and how they use people, well-meaning people, in things like the police services and armies, who may be well-intentioned, but because they are told to do things which are against the law, they go and do them. They become hired thugs, and it's like a Rottweiler. Now, Rottweilers make excellent guide dogs for the blind, but they can also be trained to kill people. Either way, as long as that dog gets a pat on the head and a little cookie, that dog will think and believe it is a good dog. And it's the same with people in the police. As long as they get a pat on the head and they are told this is the law, they will do what they are told. And it's not the law. Acts of Parliament are just that, acts. And in fact, I stopped paying taxes to the Irish government. And again, people said, oh, he's gone too far, he's deluded. The reason being because I refuse to break the law. I refuse to make someone else suffer for me living. Now, 25% to 30% of Irish taxes are being taken out for the bank, and a percentage of those are used to fund the wars that are created in Ukraine, in Syria, in Egypt, in Iraq, Afghanistan. And of course, yes, there are some issues, like in every country has issues where people aren't happy, but rather than go down the democratic route, the banks see an opportunity to create more profit for themselves, to have more money trickling up to the top, and to create the wars. So I said, look, if I pay taxes to private corporate government, I am funding the murder of children. I'm contributing to the murder of children in places like Syria and Ukraine. And I said, no, I am not contributing to the murder of children and innocent people in these countries. So what I did was I took my tax liability and I paid taxes into places like homeless charities, to support people who have had their homes stolen from them by the actions of the banks. So it's just one example. It's against the law for me to pay taxes in Ireland. It's illegal for me not to pay them, but it's against the law for me to pay them. So the two are polar opposites. They should be, in theory, they should be the same, but they're not. They are polar opposites. So hopefully that will make it clear for some people as well. It's not rocket science, it's pretty simple to understand. You know, and people say, oh, I just want to go and live my life, I don't want to get involved in all this. You know, but you are involved. There's no way out. Well, there is a way out, and that's to say, no, I'm not contributing. Now, there's so much detail and there's so many different aspects you could talk about on the subject for hours, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just trying to keep this simple so people understand. And maybe next time, before you say somebody's crazy or somebody thinks that they can just do what they want and go against what society has agreed upon, look at the facts. It's not what society has agreed upon, it's what the banks have decided you're going to do. And look at what's really going on and how the work really works, how the world really works, before shooting down a theory or condemning someone's actions or their state of mind. So an interesting thing happened in 2012 when, as an aftermath to the bank robbery of 2007, where the banks robbed themselves and got the public to pay for their robbery. A lot of economists, bankers, solicitors, lawyers got together and said how do we go about stopping this. And they used a thing called the Universal Commercial Code. Now, each country has its own set of rules, its acts and statutes for deciding the rules within the country. But for international trade, they have a thing called Universal Commercial Code, which is basically a system of agreements between countries. Well, it's not even between countries, it's between bank branches in different countries about how they conduct trade around the world. And it's the backbone for the legal system in terms of international interaction. So what these people did, this group, they set up a group known as the One People's Public Trust, and under the Universal Commercial Code, if there's an instance where someone is breaking the law, or sorry, breaking the rules, that a person may file a complaint or file a charge against a body, whether that's an individual or an organisation or a conglomerate of organisations. So this group of people put in a charge against the Bank of International Settlements, against the World Bank, the IMF, and said, you are running fractional reserve banking, which is a form of theft and slavery. So they had 6 months to rebut the charge under the Universal Commercial Code system, and they couldn't, because they can't. It's fractional reserve banking. It is what it is. It's theft and slavery, and because they couldn't, they didn't, and this became a judgment, and they lost their licenses. So all the banks in the world are operating without a license. All the courts are operating without a license because they are branches of the banks. All governments are operating without a license because they are branches of the banks. They are controlled by the banks. So it's not just unlawful anymore, it's actually illegal what is happening. So the reality is that anyone who has a loan under fractional reserve banking, be it credit cards, be it a mortgage or other kind of loan, you actually owe nothing. That's why I stopped paying my mortgage and any other loans that I had. I asked the banks, I said, show me evidence of your loss that I must repay you for, and they have no loss, so that they couldn't and they didn't. I explained to all the people trying to harass me and terrorise me from the banks. I explained that it was a contract of slavery. It's a form of bonded labour, and none of them disagreed. None of them refuted my charge against them. Basically they said, well, it doesn't matter that it's slavery, you signed the contract. But in reality that contract is invalid, and anybody who has a contract with any kind of loan under fractional reserve banking, you're not bound to the contract, because for contracts to be binding, they must be lawful, most importantly, and these are not lawful. They must be transparent. Full disclosure is the term used by legal people, but there isn't full disclosure. The banks know everything about you, and basically you know nothing about the banks. All the bondholders, it's kept secret who they are. A lot of people have done research, and I've found that it's a small minority of families and business empires that are the majority of the bondholders. But there's no disclosure. There's no disclosure on the nature of the mortgage, that it is actually slavery and that the money is counterfeit. And there must be equal consideration. Means that in a contract to be binding, there must be something of equal value or similar value in the contract. But in these contracts, these fractional reserve banking contracts, all the value comes from the person getting the loan. There is no value from the banks. And when the banks say that they have lost money, they haven't lost money. All they've done is lost projected earnings. It's like somebody from the mafia coming around your house and putting a gun to your head and getting €100 every week from you, and you do this regularly, and then the person in the mafia goes and gets something for whatever thousands, and they're paying somebody else, maybe higher up in the mafia for a Ferrari or whatever, and they come along the next week, and you've decided, oh, I'm not going along with this anymore, I'm not paying the €100, and the mafia guy says, well, you've got to, because I'm losing, I've lost my earnings here if you don't pay. It's not that they've lost anything, they didn't lose anything, they have just failed to get what they wanted or what they expected. And it's exactly the same with the banks and fractional reserve banking. That's why they call them the banksters. So nobody owes anything. If you have a loan, you don't owe anything. You've no obligation to pay it back. Now the bank, of course, will try and come heavy on you and intimidate you and terrorise you into paying it back. They will try and steal your house, generally succeed, with the complicity of the bar association and other court systems. But you have no obligation, and under the rulings, under the Universal Commercial Code, it's now illegal for them to do so. All the debt has been cancelled legally. Now they're pretending that this hasn't happened, but they know that it has. It's just because they control the media, because they control the government and the misinformation system. They're telling people. They're just not actually. They're not telling people. And they're going on as if it's just business as usual, but it's not. They have no license. They have no right. They have no authority. Only the authority that they are given. And that's why I decided I'm not giving them authority. The only authority I give is to God. That's the information. Whatever you decide to do with that information is up to yourself. Continue being a slave and contributing to the impoverishment and the murder of others and holding back the development of the planet and humanity as a species. Or take a step, however big those steps are, maybe not as big steps as I've taken, but slowly take steps. Ask your bank for evidence of their losses that you must repay them for. That's up to you. That's the information. Those are the facts. Do with it what you want.